so the first question we did last time was just you telling me a bit about yourself, how you got into real estate and all of that. So maybe if we start from there again.
Yeah, I kind of fell into real estate actually. Before working in real estate, I was actually living up in the Northern Territory doing child protection and disability support work. And for that period of time was a really good opportunity to, I feel like, give back in a way. But before that, I was actually a sales manager of a video production company over in Austin, Texas and Los Angeles. So that was a really cool experience. And then the period in Northern Territory just was a bit of a break from sales, and then made the move back to Adelaide after family circumstances changed, and then found myself in real estate. My friend Pete actually invited me to come to real estate, and my initial response was absolutely not, because I thought all real estate agents were jerks. But I knew him and knew he wasn't a jerk, so I thought maybe there's something to this. And then after getting into real estate, it quickly changed my perspective of it being about houses, but then realising it's actually really about people. And that's something I really love about it.
Yeah, and I remember last time when we got to this point, I said, like, has that shaped your experience of how you view housing and what a home represents? Because it is that place of refuge for a lot of people, safety, security, and you gave a really nice answer to that. So do you mind speaking on that again?
Yeah, I feel like a house is so much more of a home, and it is what you make it. And I know we talked about my experience in youth work, and oftentimes my role and the children that I would work with was in emergency accommodation. So if their home wasn't safe for various reasons, whether it be substance or domestic violence abuse, and having a space where these kids could come and be safe, instead of having the kids kind of go to different carers' houses, what we do is we'd find a home for them that could become their safe space, and the carers would come and go throughout the day. And being able to create that environment, not just with working with young people, but even for ourselves and our families, having that place of refuge, that safety, that feeling of being able to come home and maybe take off the mask that you wear during the day at your corporate job or whatever it may be. It's something that you really can't put a price on, even though we kind of have to in a way, but it's the intangibles. Yeah.
No, I really responded to that because I think it, for you, probably, this is me making an assumption, but it brings a humanity to real estate again. And like you said, there are some people who maybe have that cowboy personality, but to have someone who can recognise what a home represents and then help someone on that journey, that's really nice.
Yeah, I think the real estate industry has come quite a long way, and look, there are still cowboys out there, and if you have a look at any industry that's made up of people, is you have the spectrum of people that are have a lot of self-interest. You have people that are really generous and they give so much to other people, sometimes to their own detriment, and real estate's no different. We're in an industry where we work with people, and given that it is essentially a sales role, it does and can attract a certain type of person. But there have been so many amazing agents that I've met over the years that I try and emulate to be like, which is always having a people first approach, always wanting to do the best by their clients, both buyers and sellers. And the real estate industry has definitely come a long way. I feel like it does still have a way to go, but when it does come to selling or buying a home, not only is this oftentimes the most financial investment of their life, one of the biggest transactions they'll ever do in their life, but also one of the biggest emotional transactions. We work with people that might be downsizing from their family home for 50 years where they've raised their children, or it might be a young couple who just had their first baby, they're looking for their first home together. And that's really, I find, the difference between it just being a house and it being someone's home. So we're super grateful to be able to help people through that journey.
And then the next question I had was based on the median house price for a family home in Adelaide, which I think we said last time was over $900,000. That is like an aggregate, obviously.
Yeah.
But is that figure consistent with what you're all observing as agents at the moment?
Yeah, good question. And because we're in the southern part of Adelaide here, around Woodcroft, and the median house price here is sitting around that 750,000. Obviously, as we get a little bit closer to the CBD, that price goes up, and then if you continue heading further south or further north, then those prices can come down a little bit. But in Adelaide, it's pretty consistent now, kind of within an hour of the city, kind of each way, that median house price is really pushing up. And what we see down here is it being a first home buyers market where, just going back 4 or 5 years ago, people would have been able to get into a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home for maybe 400,000. And now they're struggling to kind of get a unit for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like in my research, I found that one of the things that politicians are trying to recommend as a solution is, let's improve transport links, because then people can buy further out, they can get a cheaper home to enter the market. But then obviously I'm assuming that obviously if you're close to transport links, that actually adds to the value of your home. So is that kind of a little bit of a...
Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that, in that if you make a suburb or a place more accessible, then more people will be interested in moving there. We're actually seeing that a lot down in Selix Beach and down in Aldinga Beach as well at the moment, in that there's a lot of investment going into the road. It initially used to be a single lane either way. They're now expanding that. They're doing overpasses, they're doing underpasses, and they're considering extending the train line further from Seaford as well. So with all of those things happening, people look at now it being more accessible. So naturally, the desirability is going to go up, and then as do the prices.
I'm going to have to look into that a bit more.
Yeah.
And then last time as well, we said what the government kind of recommends as an affordable house price is around that $500,000 to $650,000 mark. How many homes have you sold for $500,000 or less in the last 12 months?
And before you asked me that, I hadn't really thought about it, but reflecting on the sales, even as an entire office, we haven't sold a property for less than $500,000 over the last 12 months. And the only property that we sold prior to that was a unit in a big group of about 40 units. And another property that we did sell for $500,000 needed over $100,000 worth of work, and essentially was probably just a knockdown that would eventually be developed on the property. So we're really not seeing too many properties available for that price point anymore, unfortunately.
And yeah, that kind of goes into the next question I was going to ask. Do you have any properties for that price at the moment?
Yeah, unfortunately not. We've just launched a little 2-bedroom home this week that was built in 2017, and that starting price is at $600,000. So we're really seeing that kind of bottom portion of the market because of the investors that we have shopping at that lower price point, first home buyers and downsizers. That bottom portion of the market, there's so much competition. So if you imagine the bottom of the market being at, say, 400,000 a few years ago, because there's so much competition there, people might start offering above the range, and that just becomes the norm. And then the bottom of the market slowly starts creeping up. And really where we're seeing that entry level now is in that high 400s, low 500s, sometimes beyond, to secure a property that only 5 years ago might have been 380,000.
Yeah, and I think even again when I've been looking into things, especially on realestate.com, because you told me some of the filters you can put in and things like that, and I had a go, and it seems to be, it doesn't matter whether you're east, south, west, north, these prices are kind of creeping up everywhere. So areas where you thought, I might be able to sneak in there and still get something, it's still very difficult, or it seems to be from what I've observed.
Yeah, one strategy that you can employ is, if you know you want to be living in a certain area, is if you are shopping on realestate.com or Domain, as soon as a property goes up on those platforms, you know that everyone else shopping in Adelaide is going to be looking there too. So if you, let's call it, you know, if you want to be in Warradale or something like that and you have a certain budget in mind, or Marion, then go to the sold section of realestate.com, find the agents that are selling the most in the area, and then reach out to them directly and find out if they have any properties available off market, or if you can be put onto their buyers list to be notified when properties do come up off market. Because if you can find a property before it gets to the market, you're going to eliminate 90% of the competition. And so if you can find something, or you can find something that you can potentially secure for your price point with a long-term plan of potentially doing some renovations or adding some value, that could be a really good way to get into the market. One of the struggles, or one of the, I guess, downfalls I see with first home buyers now for some reason is they all want to be moving into their dream home right away, whereas our parents, for example, or our grandparents might have had that intermediate home where it was not their family home, you know, not 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms with a sea view on 1,000 square meters, but it was just that first home. And, you know, if we zoom out and look at the last 100 years, or even more so the last 20 years in Adelaide, although some years growth might be a little bit slower, but if you zoom out, you see the median house price continue to go up on a big enough time frame. So if you have that long-term goal of just getting into the market, maybe adding a little bit of value to that property, then the time comes where maybe you and your partner, husband, wife, whatever it may be, then have, you know, full-time roles, or potentially a changing career where you both have a higher income for the home, you've got a property that's gone up in value, then you get that opportunity to kind of look at the next step forward. Where we see now, I think because interest rates had been so low for so long, that a lot of people would just borrow up to their capacity and try and find their forever home as their first home, and kind of live up and sometimes beyond their means.
Do you think that's a result of people having to buy later in life, so that because they've had to take longer to accumulate a deposit? Potentially.
I think there's many factors here. I will probably lean more towards just the need for immediate gratification. You know, when you think about social media, when you think about everything that you can get overnight, these quick fix solutions, that especially my generation and the younger generations are so used to that immediate gratification, fast internet, you know, connection with your phones, cars, things like that. So they're, as a blanket rule, if you can work with that delayed gratification to get into an intermediate home before your dream home, I think that would serve people a lot better financially. Again, just personal opinion, not financial advice. But I feel like because there is that immediate gratification need to have everything you want right now. And then on the other side, yes, it is taking people longer to save for their deposits because the cost of living is so high. And unfortunately, the market has been going up at a rate over these last 4 or 5 years since COVID, that people can't save at the rate that the market's going up.
Hello. I'll let you walk in and get settled.
Okay. You're on next.
No, I don't think so. Hello.
It's actually interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I was revisiting the home builder scheme and that whole idea of that policy is basically just for new builds. And one of the questions that I'm going to ask, because I managed to get an interview not on film but with Nick Champion, the Minister for Housing.
Amazing.
And I was going to ask him, do you think that policy that you've got in place at the moment needs to be adjusted to also include existing homes? Because a lot of the developments that seem to be happening, they're on the higher end of the scale as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just makes me realise how complex the issue actually is.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of what you're saying of kind of reframing things in your head, and maybe you have to make some compromises on what you think your first home is going to look like.
Yeah.
But if you really want to break into the market, yes, it's difficult, but maybe you are going to have to kind of rethink that kind of picture in your head.
Yeah, and I think if we think about things like let's consider Instagram, for example, where unfortunately the society that we're in at the moment is a lot of comparison, and we should never compare ourselves to others, maybe just to where we were maybe this time last year, so that we know we're growing and progressing. And so a lot of it does come down to self-image and how others perceive us. So that's why people want to go for their dream home for the first home. So if people can kind of take that little bit of a step back, maybe they find a renovator, they can get into the market, and then over a few years continue to add or change or tweak that property. So then that way it does go up in value from the renovations, and maybe that suits that chapter of life for you. Maybe it turns into an investment property later on, and then can take that next step forward into the dream home. But if we can lean into that delayed gratification, I feel like that would definitely serve some people. And for a lot of the first home buyers we see is that they might come through one of our properties that does need a lick of paint. Maybe it does need some new carpets or some new cabinets, and they walk out thinking it's not for them, when in reality we've seen some buyers 6 or 12 months later still haven't found anything, and the market's gone up, another 5%, which means that in order to have bought that same property, they would have needed to save another X amount or be able to borrow another X amount. And I don't believe that can continue to happen. The market's been going up since COVID. I don't think it can continue on the rate that we have. But if, for example, that same imaginary couple had bought that property 2 years ago that did need a little bit of work, even if they didn't do any work to it over these last few years, we've seen parts of the market grow down here up to 15% and up to 50% in the last 4 or 5 years. And that's just not a rate that people can save at. So if people had that opportunity then, again, not financial advice, this is just kind of based on what we've seen, they would have been able to potentially take that step forward sooner than they initially anticipated.
Yeah, and that was one thing that I was thinking about a little bit as well, because I changed one of my questions a smidge. And it was, when you compare Adelaide to other markets interstate, where do you think Adelaide kind of fits in the big picture? Because typically you would think, oh yeah, South Australia, it's nothing compared to like Sydney or Melbourne, but that's not necessarily the case anymore, or it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, my skill set is really on to the Adelaide market. However, we had been quite underpriced compared to the rest of Australia. If we consider major cities, Adelaide and Perth were quite far behind the eastern states. And so, yes, we have seen, upwards of 50% growth in the last 4 or 5 years. But in reality, we were kind of catching up to where the rest of the market was. Now, again, very different cities and states, but there's even talk now of Adelaide potentially taking over the median house price of Melbourne and Sydney, which is wild. And I still feel like there is room to move and grow and for the market to expand price-wise in Adelaide, because we were quite affordable there for quite a long time.
Yeah, because Melbourne, I was watching a report yesterday saying they're starting to now go down a little bit. But then Perth, I remember I had some friends that were over there kind of working in the mines, and they were like, oh, it's so super cheap over here, I can't actually get back anything on my investment. It was bad because I think things I can't remember exactly what happened, but things were happening over there and it wasn't going to plan.
Yes.
And now it's a couple of years later, now, as you said, that market is going up and up and up again. So
yeah, I mean, we even have some spaces like that here in I won't call it Adelaide, but in South Australia, we do have a lot of those mining towns where 10 years ago, there was so much work there that the supply and demand of those houses, there was a lot of supply and very little demand. Oh, sorry, the other way around. Yeah, correct, exactly. So a lot of demand and not many properties. So all of the people were paying premiums to get a property, and then all of a sudden a mine shuts down or they scale down work. Then all of a sudden you've got, let's call it 2,000 houses with only 500 families. Then people are, it's like a fire sale on the properties. And so in Adelaide, we're finding a big supply and demand issue where there's just not enough houses for people that want to get into the market, plus immigration. I feel like that's what's helping to boost the house prices as well.
Yeah, and then obviously, as you said, you do a lot of work with first home buyers, and probably for a lot of those first home buyers, well, they are on a lower income. So budgets are obviously a lot tighter.
Yeah.
If we continue to use that $500,000 as a baseline, if we get lucky enough to find a property that we can get for that price, what do you think it looks like? Because you've said like it might need a little bit of work, a little bit of cosmetic stuff to be done, but yeah, what does it kind of look like?
Yeah, so on the market we're seeing good quality units, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, that are selling for around that 500 mark now. If you're lucky, you'll potentially find a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home on a Torrens title, and if you can find something off market, it might open you up to more possibilities. But really we're looking at something that needs a little bit of work here in the south for 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, or a really beautiful unit for around that price.
Are there any hidden costs with those properties, do you think, like with units and things like that?
Yeah, so with a unit, typically it's going to be part of a community title or a strata title group, which means that you're either paying for a community title, a common insurance for if it's a shared driveway or something like that, or on a strata title, typically that does have what's called like a sinking fund, which is every quarter people contribute money to it in case any maintenance works needs doing. Plus, you know, if there's any administration fee, if you have a governing body that looks over that strata. So that can be anywhere from a few hundred, and I've seen some up to, you know, $1,200 a quarter in additional fees on top of that for a unit. So that's why a lot of people do try and find a home where it's on a Torrens title, so you don't have to pay those additional fees. And that's why those prices of those types of properties have continued to go up.
And then the next thing I wanted to ask was, obviously we know first home buyers are finding their journey into property difficult right now, and that's definitely been what I've noticed in the interviews I've conducted, or just in general conversations with my friends. And so a lot of young people are starting to feel like really fatigued by the process, like either I'm never going to break into the market, or kind of what you were saying, like I'm not going to get what I want, or they feel like they're being priced out because other people are coming in with bigger offers. Do you empathise with their position?
Yeah, absolutely. And with the market that we're in, we see a lot of first home buyers, and whenever we're calling people back that have made offers, unfortunately only one person can get that phone call to say congratulations, you've got it. And in most recent times I had a property where I had to call another 22 people back and say they didn't get it, unfortunately. And so it's so hard, especially when you see people over and over again at different open inspections. It's like you wish you had some magic formula to help a first home buyer get the property, and oftentimes it unfortunately does come down to the price that they can pay. So there are a couple of strategies to help first home buyers in borrowing. I'm not a mortgage broker. This would be a good one to chat to a mortgage broker about, but the brokers I have spoken to talk about 2 really good strategies. Recently, the government have changed essentially the borrowing legislation. So typically in the past, where you and your husband or wife could borrow together to buy a property, you can actually do that with friends now. So you and a friend, if you're renting together, could potentially have both of your incomes considered to then go and get a home loan together. And another way is if you have the benefit of having parents that own a home that potentially has some equity in it, you can get what's called a guarantor loan, which is essentially they guarantor your ability to then pay your mortgage. And that's what some brokers I speak to consider it as like a golden ticket to getting into the market. And outside of that, just stay consistent, because if you can continue on when other people say it's all too hard, then you get the ability to potentially secure a property. And if that was the case 3 years ago, then your property down here in Woodcroft could have potentially gone up 10% in the last 3 years, maybe more. So it's that opportunity cost of saying, stuffer, I'm not going to get into the market, versus actually finding something, look, maybe it's not your forever home, but you actually get the opportunity to get into the market. And they say hindsight's always 20/20, and I'm sure there's things that we could have looked back on and gone, oh, I wish I had done this. If we zoom out far enough, the Adelaide market typically does continue to go up. Again, not financial advice, and I don't think the market can continue going at the rate that it is, but I still feel like Adelaide is quite fairly priced compared to the rest of Australia.
Yeah, you strike me as the kind of person as well that, obviously you said like you have like 22 people and then you have to call them.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of seeing them all the time and you probably get an understanding for what they want. Do you sometimes, like if you're appraising somewhere, does your mind kind of go, oh, so-and-so?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had that happen yesterday. I had a client that had missed out on a few of our properties, and we're going out to look at one next week. At the end of the day, my role is always to act in the best interest of my client, which is the vendor, and essentially to get them the best price. And so if we were to do something off market, it would need to be the vendor's idea, because as soon as they engage me as an agent, my role is to always act in their best interest. And so that's why it's really hard, and I say that you can't get attached to home buyers, unfortunately, because you might meet someone and you might hear their story and you want them to get the property, but they might be $50,000 off the top offer. And so unfortunately it is up to the vendor at the end of the day. We can always make our recommendations. There have been some really beautiful times where my vendor has asked, okay, are any of the people offering investors or are they first home buyers? And they said, yes, all these ones are first home buyers. And they go, that's a lower offer, I'd actually like to sell it to them. So that does happen. Oftentimes people do choose the higher offer, but that's why it's important to stay consistent and just keep getting out there and keep meeting people. Yeah.
And then in terms of practical tips, and I loved this part last time because I think it'll be really, really helpful to people. How can first home buyers improve their chances of securing that property that they've fallen in love with?
Yes. And again, not financial advice. This is just based on what we've seen over the last few years. What we typically see for properties is if there is a lot of interest, if there is a price guide on it, let's call it, 500 to 550, the psychology of the market at the moment says, okay, if I want that property, in my mind, I need to offer above the top end of the range. So if we've got 5 offers, 4 out of those 5 or 3 out of those 5 are usually at the top of the range or beyond. And where we see first home buyers get unstuck, or at least stick around in the market shopping for 6 to 12 months, is that they might see a property they like and they think that, okay, in order to get it, I want to try and get a bargain, I'm going to offer at the bottom of the range. And if that range was 500 to 550, they might even offer below the 500 mark when all of the other people are potentially offering above. So they just don't get a look in. And then they go, okay, well, let's go have a look at this next property, and then maybe we'll offer a little bit more, and maybe they offer 510. And then this continues to go on over 6 or 8 or 12 months, and they eventually then become that buyer that says, we really want this property, I'm going to offer above the range. But the challenge there is if they do that for 12 months, the market could have gone up quite a lot. And so for the money they're actually buying, they could have got more when they first started, if that makes sense. And again, not financial advice, do with what I've observed at your own will. But if you really know what property you want and you have a budget in mind, consider, and this is something we say to our clients as well, it's like if you see it sell to somebody else and you see what it comes up on realestate.com for, what it sold for, and if you look at your partner and say, I would have paid that if I knew, figure out what that number is for you guys so you know that you can walk away knowing that you gave it every possible crack, and then you can say, cool, that wasn't for us, we'll move on to the next one. And when it comes to actually putting offers in on your property, the first thing is always be pre-approved. If you're not pre-approved in the market, then you are just creating additional risk to select your offer versus all of these other people that have pre-approval. So definitely get pre-approved. And then when it comes to actually putting an offer in, make sure you're very clear, very concise with all of your information. Put your phone number on there so that we can get in contact with you if you are pre-approved through a broker or the bank. Put their contact information on there, because if we are looking at all of the offers, we like to call and kind of pressure test the offers to make sure, okay, this person says they're pre-approved, yes, that's current, yes, they're good to go. So that helps us. So it makes it easier for us to speak confidently to your offer to our owner. And then also if you have a conveyancer, which is essentially like a land lawyer, so they're the ones that sign over the deed of the contract, the deed of the property into your name, things like that. If you've already engaged one, put their contact number on there as well, because then straight away, if we're looking at 5 offer forms, one has everything filled out. They've also added in their broker's number, their conveyancer's number. We can see that this person is someone that already has their ducks in a row versus someone we need to continue calling for additional information that immediately says, okay, this person looks like they're on the front foot, and we can speak confidently to their offer, if that makes sense.
You can trust what they're saying is actually accurate.
That's right. So for example, if I'm calling my vendor and I say, cool, I've got 2 offers in front of me, I've got one here, I've already spoken to their broker, they're pre-approved, they're good to go, versus I've tried to call the other one, I haven't been able to get a hold of them, I don't know if they're pre-approved, they said they are, but they haven't given us their broker's details. As a vendor of someone that's selling a home, which typically sounds like a safer bet, usually the one that has all of that information on the front foot. So unfortunately, there's no magic phrase that you can write on an offer form to guarantee you get the property, but just know that typically the reason that people select offers is the dollar amount at the end of the day. But if you are a first home buyer, then lean into that, and then share your story. If it's a home that's been a family home for many, many years, they'd much rather see it sell to a first home buyer that's going to continue it being a home versus a developer that's going to come and knock it down. So if you can work whatever you have in your favour, then I think it'll really help.
Yeah, and earlier, I think right at the beginning of the interview, you actually said this is one of the biggest financial decisions you can ever make, and emotional decisions too. How important is it to find an agent that you can trust to kind of navigate these challenging times?
Yeah, it's very important. And as a buyer, there are agents available that are buyer's agents. So for example, I'm a selling agent, which I help people sell their homes, but you have the ability to engage a buyer's agent to essentially go out, look at properties, present them to you, make negotiations and offers on your behalf. And then when it comes to finding an area that you want to live in, like I said, go to the sold section of realestate.com, see which agents are selling the most and build a relationship with them, because we get so many inquiries every day from different buyers. If you just give them a call once, they're not going to remember you. They get anywhere from 50 to 100 phone calls a day. But if you're consistently following up with emails, with calls every few days, hey, do you have anything coming up? Can you put us on your off-market list? Follow up a couple of days later. It's one of those things where you want to be the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, and more so that even if you annoy the agent, they'll try and find you a property to sell to you just so you stop calling them. Honestly, if you can find someone to help with that, the end goal here is to find you a home. So don't feel silly to continue following up agents, because at the end of the day, it's your safe space, it's your home. So yeah, really important to build those relationships with agents, and then also just trust your gut. If you're feeling like someone's a little bit shady, I think as humans we have really good BS detectors. So if you feel like something's a little bit off with an agent, then oftentimes just trust your gut.
And you guys seem like you've got a really good little team here. You seem really genuine. How do you all kind of support and nurture those relationships with your clients and the people coming in? What I guess differentiates Ray White Woodcroft from maybe somewhere else?
Yeah, and I think for us, we've always been a people first approach. So Pete here, the principal, he lives here in Woodcroft. His kids go to Woodcroft College. I grew up down here, and outside of real estate, I run a mental health group where we share breath work, meditation, connection to pay forward things that have helped me in my life through challenging times. And for us, I believe our ethos is to always leave people better than we found them, and to have them have an amazing experience with us. And yeah, we're definitely a people first approach.
Yeah, and what brings you the most joy in your role?
I feel like where we talked about for every property we sell, we sometimes make 10 phone calls to people that they didn't get the property. I think my most joyful moment is that phone call to say to someone that they've got the property, and only to be seconded when they come in and pick up the keys for their home. So those moments are pretty special.
And then I didn't ask you this last time on camera, but is there anything that you kind of want to add to the conversation that you feel like I've missed or that is kind of important to share or acknowledge?
I feel like for first home buyers, it's just resilience. You know, there's going to be a lot of rejection when you're shopping for your first home, and it's really hard not to get attached to properties, but just stay resilient, stay consistent, keep getting out there and trying to secure a home, because failure is quitting, and just staying persistent will eventually get you there. So yeah, just keep up the good work. Yeah.
Yay! Thank you.
You're welcome.